Welcome to episode 9 of We Should Run the AFL. I'm Jez.
And I'm Wally, and next week on We Should Run the AFL, we're going to look at the protected zone and talk about how we think it could be done better, and also anything else that comes up from this weekend of footy, which is round 1.
And we might also do a quick review of round 1 and maybe even a quick look into round 2, if we have time.
We'll see how we feel about it.
Exactly. Exactly. And then this week, we will do a review of all the matches from opening round. It'll take us quite a while. Yeah. And then then we're going to do a bit of storytelling actually. But anything you want to say about opening round? How did you feel about it? Did you like it?
Opening round 0, I loved it. Loved having only 2 rounds. And I've said previously I didn't like the idea of it, but I thought 2 games. Thought it was actually pretty cool. Like they're just come these marquee games. Like really enjoyed it. What do you think of it?
I'd love to know why you're laughing as you say it.
I can't even say it with a straight face.
Well, I think completely the opposite of you.
Wow.
It's very surprising based on previous episodes, but it still doesn't work for me opening round, especially, and I know it was out of their hand, out of their control. But having just 2 games, it just felt very disjointed. It almost seems pointless now that they've got to have 4 teams are going to have a second bye and everybody else has 1 bye. I don't get the point of it. I don't think it makes it any more exciting. I don't think it. I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we're not privy to the stats of viewers and attendances at the northern states for opening round. But as an event, it's just not really working for me personally. Nothing to do with the results, but I don't really enjoy it. No, it really isn't. Like I suppose that can lead us into the thing, but I'm a Collingwood supporter. We got thumped by GWS, and to be honest, we deserved it. They played really well. They were the better team on the day, so it's got nothing to do with that. I applaud them. I think they looked fantastic. Also, try to be positive about it and think that it's only opening round. There's plenty of time left before the really serious pointy end of the year comes around, and you don't want to be that far ahead of everybody in March. We saw what happened to Sydney last year. They were unbeatable in the first half, and then they came back to the pack a lot in the second half, and then obviously we know what happened in the grand final. So and Brisbane losing the first 5 games. So it's really, at this time of year, it's still sort of teams trying to find their feet and everything. So it's not such a big deal to me to loss, but the opening round itself just doesn't work. I don't like it. I think they should scrap it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, even as you were speaking, I was sort of, like you said, something about wasn't that exciting or something like that. And I'm like, I think it's about promoting, generally they keep saying it's about promoting the game in the northern states. When you think about that, they have games in the northern states every week. Like there's 2 teams in Queensland, 2 in New South Wales, and they have home games. Each of them has home games every second week. So it's getting promoted there every week anyway. So does it need that one extra week of the few games of promotion?
Exactly. And that's my point. Like, I don't think it makes any difference unless there's some stats that's showing that it's, the sole focus of everybody in those 2 states, and they're getting double the amount of viewers or whatever than they would normally get in any other round. I don't know, but without knowing that, I don't think it adds any value to the start of the season. If anything, I think it detracts from it. And I think we've talked about it before, but there's enough inconsistencies with leveling the playing field around the fixture that we don't need to be giving teams 2 byes over other teams having 1 bye, and having a bye, 1 month into the season seems a bit bizarre as well. I have very few positives that I can think of to say about it. Unlike you, because I know that you loved it.
Loved it. I loved it. But in turn, what I didn't love was my tipping. I was 0-2 last week, so not a great start. But did watch the games and actually thought it was great to have footy back, even though, as you know, that Collingwood didn't go so well for us. But just great to watch the footy again. GWS looked awesome. Hawthorn looked really good. I was actually surprised. I thought Sydney had come out really firing, and maybe they did, but Hawthorn still held them off and won, and so they looked really good. And we're actually recording this a couple of days into round 1, and Hawthorn's just won their second game and again looked pretty good. And then Carlton Richmond play the night. Richmond, who no one thought would win a game for the whole year, have already won one. So maybe their last, maybe not be. Who knows? But they were great.
Well, they can just stop now, really. I mean, they got their win. You know,
They've
no one thought they would. So
by infinity.
yeah, you know, quit while you're ahead, sort of thing.
Exactly.
But no, but yeah, it was. Look, I'll be honest, I haven't seen a lot. I saw the last quarter of the Carlton Richmond game. I didn't see any of last night's game, but yeah, look, I think it's good for the game when you have premiership fancy losing to the team favoured to win the wooden spoon. I think that's always a positive thing. Obviously not for Carlton and their supporters, but for the bigger picture and the product of the game, I think it's a good thing. I'm still sure. I still believe Carlton will be fine. I'm not really too worried. It's one game, and we'll come back to that a bit later with the love it, hate it around that. So I won't say too much on that one. But yeah, have you got anything else you want to say about opening round?
Well, the only thing which is going to lead into our stories and then our topic for the week is that cramping was a big topic last week, and even I think it was the Carlton Richmond game. It was one of the games I watched the last couple of days. There was cramping then as well, and they used up all their pickle juice and had to go and get more from down in the rooms or something like that. And so it was a big issue in the first couple of rounds, and with the heat. And again, it's hot today here in Melbourne. It's like 30 odd degrees, and so it could be a thing again. Who knows? But it made us think of times that we've cramped. And I remember one time, I don't know how old I was, but I must have only been like 4 or 5 or 6. Like I was pretty young. And during the night, I woke up and I needed to go to the toilet. And so
I'm laughing already.
Sorry?
I'm laughing already.
It gets worse. So I'm walking off and I go to the toilet, sit on the toilet, sitting there, finished everything I need to do, and then went to stand up and both my thighs cramped up. I was this little kid who'd never cramped before at all. And so I didn't know what had happened. Every time I tried to move, just this pain just shot through my legs and I felt like it froze up and I couldn't move. So I'm just sitting on the toilet. I was a bit nervous. I didn't want to wake anybody up and like cause any drama. So I'm just sitting on the toilet. I genuinely don't know how long I was there for, but I'm going to say an hour. Maybe it felt like an hour, it was 5 minutes, but it was a long time. And I just kept every now and then I'm crying, like I'm trying to stand up and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm sitting there crying. Anyway, after however long it was, my stepdad got up and he needed to go to the toilet, and he opens the toilet door, and I'm just sitting there, tears streaming down my face. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, my leg. And he just grabs me, stands me up, and he like goes straight through the game. He goes, there you go to bed. And I went, and I didn't even know until like the next day. He's like, what happened was you cramped and blah, 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 blah. And he actually, it probably wasn't as brutal as that. He probably massaged my legs a little bit as well. But I remember reading Max Walker's book, and he's like, never in a good story with the facts. So he just ripped me up and threw me off into bed. No, I reckon he would have massaged it out of it. But yeah, just that feeling. I've had cramps since for a while. I got a lot of foot cramps in the bottom of my foot, and it's just when it first happens as you move, it just gives you that shock almost of like, even though you know it, your brain's like, what is happening? How about you?
You're like, why me?
Why me? Eat more salt.
Yeah, look, I had one in my early 20s. We were playing in a just like I was involved in a youth movement, and we were having a footy against another youth movement, and I cramped in both my calves at the exact same time. Oh. And I just remember having to, I say army crawl off the ground, but I couldn't move my legs. So it's just my arms just moving like this, dragging my feet along. And I just managed to get off the ground. And then, a bit later, I can't remember how much later, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was, I went back on the ground and started cramping again. Like once you get the cramps, you can't get rid of them during that game, I reckon. Like watching Nick Dacos the other day, I thought once he's got cramps, that's it, he's gone. That's it for the rest of the game. You just can't fix it that quickly, even with pickle juice, I don't think, from my experience. No. So that was pretty awful to feel.
Full on. And even if it doesn't come back, it's always just on that edge of feeling. If you move a little bit more a certain way, it's going to be there. You feel that little just starting of it. It's like, I can't exert myself in that direction or I'm going to cramp up again. And you just don't want to, because it's like, I know it was like, oh, it's only cramp. It's only cramp. Cramp is terrible. It's really bad.
Well, it's not like you hear people going, "Oh God, I hope I cramp today." You know?
Yeah, that's right. But it leads into that what we're going to chat about, which is actually something your dad spoke about, which is the heat that they played in, and heard a couple of coaches saying, we're starting the season earlier than before, and the heat seems to be going later than before, like into March, and we're having 30-degree days, so it's pretty hot. So, and I actually didn't know this, but you mentioned there is a heat policy already, but your dad had a few thoughts on how he should run the AFL.
Yeah, we should get him on.
Yeah.
So look, my understanding is for today's games in Melbourne, or maybe not just Melbourne, but today's games, they're enacting the AFL's heat policy, which I think is things like quarter time and maybe 3/4 time breaks are extended by 2 minutes each, and there are extra water carriers available on the ground.
Are they allowed to carry extra water, or is it just the same amount of water, but just more people?
Yeah, they each get like half a bottle of water, but they've got more people to bring those half bottles out.
What if they start cramping? What if the water carriers start cramping?
Well, that's an interesting point. Do they have their own like subs, like the water carrier sub?
Really?
Because you've got the extra umpire. Like if somebody goes down somewhere, there's another umpire who can come on. But they have that for the water carriers.
Well, they should.
I'm putting my hand up. I'm happy to nominate myself. I'll go out there and do it.
What about like the masseuses who when they go off and they're massaging their thigh, what if their hands cramp up? Is there someone who can take their spot?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's got to be, I think every position in the football department of an AFL club needs to have like interchange or reserves or whatever you want to call it available on call on game day, just in case. Like you can't be too cautious.
You really can't, like getting that water out, getting the massage, holding up the sign that's got TNT on it or whatever they do, smiley faces.
Exactly. I mean, even the cheer squad, you probably like holding up those banners.
It's hard.
And then you got the things at quarter time and 3/4 time, all those sponsored events and that, people trying to play tic-tac-toe. I don't know how they do it, but like somehow there's always somebody who doesn't really understand how to play that game. They somehow get it wrong when they could have blocked the other person, but instead they go for the win and they lose. All
right, there's Jez's love-hate for the week.
We've sort of gone off on a little bit of a tangent here from it, but in terms of heat policy, my dad was thinking that it would be good if they had an increase in the number of players available on the interchange. So going from it's just gone blank. Is it 4 and a sub or 3 and a sub? It's 4 and a sub, right? So maybe to have 6 and a sub, or sub rule's a whole other story. But let's just assume that it's going to be there. So maybe having an extra couple of players on the bench for each team, but also we should have looked this up beforehand. But I can't remember the limit is to the number of interchanges per game. 75. I think it's 80. 75, is it? Okay. So maybe increasing that during, as part of the heat policy, so that there's more players available and more breaks that can be had by the players. What do you think? Do you think they're good suggestions from my dad?
I think your dad's onto something. And I think even having the cap on interchanges is a really interesting one as well anyway, because it was designed to kind of fatigue the players and all this and leave the best players on the ground and stuff like that. I don't know if I don't think it's lessened injuries. I don't think it's sped up the game and all that. So I don't know if it's done what it was designed to do, because there seems to be a hell of a lot of injuries, and a lot of them I feel are potentially even caused by fatigued bodies and cramming, stuff like that. And so, and I like the tactical subs. Like I liked back in the day I heard Dane Swan the other day on an interview, and he's like, I ruined football because of the way I played with all the subs. I had to change the rule. But I kind of like that. Like I love that someone can just come on for 2 minutes and go. Like it becomes tactical and it's, of course it still is with the 75, but there's even almost more to it then. And I always find it interesting as well, even with the subs. And again, whole other story. But I like it. I think increase it, and even if it's not much, even just an extra 5 or 10 rotations could make a big difference over a couple of quarter, 8 more, whatever, 8, 10, a couple of quarter, and then suddenly just a couple of people who are just starting to to really struggle a bit, they get off for a couple of minutes and good to go again.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you think would be the ideal number of bench players with the heat policy?
Well, potentially, I guess with the heat policy, you could even if you didn't increase it, is just get rid of the sub. I guess they can't get rid of the sub rule for one day, but almost as that, just do five on the bench for the over 35 degrees or something like that, over 35-year-olds.
That could be part of the rule. You've got to be over 35 to be the extra player on the bench during the heat policy.
That's right.
We'd be awesome at that. We could just rotate our whole team around each week.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. But yeah, you could. In terms of an ideal number, if we keep in the sub, I could even just one extra player. But you would have to, even with one extra player, it feels like you'd have to increase the number of rotations as well.
Yeah,
I feel like, because it'd be pretty hard to have 5 on the bench and suddenly the 7, like an extra player and the only same number of rotations, and trying to work that out and suddenly change the tactics and just keep the proportion almost the same. If it's 4 for 75, if it's 4 for 75, what's that?
The cricket averages, score.
Right?
It's a cricket score.
Yeah, exactly. 4 for 75. 2. So that's like 19 rotations per person on the bench for number of people you have on the bench. So that for 5. So it becomes plus 5 times 19, 95. You get 95 rotations for 5.
Yep.
And just up it, and then it's exactly the same. And it's because it's literally going to be perhaps one round at the start of the season and perhaps one final. Like it's going to be really rare that it's going to happen anyway. So it's not going to upset the apple cart too much.
What about this for a totally out there idea?
Okay. No one on the bench.
No. That's a whole different thing. But no, keep it as it is with the 4 bench players.
Yep.
And have 3 subs, and you can bring on a sub at quarter time, half time, and 3/4 time.
Okay. And what if you don't? What if you decide not to? Can you bring them on during the quarter, or does it have to be at quarter time, half time, 3/4 time?
No, any time from quarter time to half time you can bring them on.
Yep.
But you can't bring 2 subs on in the 3rd quarter, for example. If you don't use the first one by half time, you miss out.
I like it. Yeah, because that's a whole different thing again, isn't it? Like it's 3 fresh players coming on as opposed to one extra person who might be getting just as fatigued as the other type thing. So in the heat,
you might have one player like in the 1st quarter, for example, go just play the whole quarter, just run yourself ragged. You'll sub you off at quarter time, and we'll bring on some fresh legs at that time. So you're using less. You don't even have to necessarily increase the number of interchanges because you're going to potentially use less by having that one player not need it. And then like you got 4 players really who could be playing and never need to come off the ground.
I like it, and it could become tactical that way as well. Whereas you could have obviously again like different types of players, or you could just basically go like with what you're saying, just go one position. 4 players who play that position. So you have one. You just go hard for this quarter, then you're off, and then the next player comes on, takes his actual position, goes hard, comes off at half time. You just have those 4 players all playing high half forward or something, and just going like 150% for the whole quarter. Don't come off for the quarter, just go flat out.
Yeah.
Kick 5, get 24 possessions, then like you're off.
I think there's something to it. I think we're onto something here.
Well, absolutely. But as usual, I think we're definitely onto something.
I don't really need to say it, do I?
No. And one of those things where it's almost like just give it a crack. Because again, it's not going to happen that often. Just give it a crack and see. And even in the pre-season when it is potentially really hot too, like often they'll say 6 interchange or whatever, unlimited interchange and stuff in the practice games, which I always find a bit weird as well. Like I feel like practice games, you're practicing a game. But they're practicing a totally different situation to a game, so it's not really practicing a game. But yeah, just do that in the like those last week of practice games. Just try that.
Well, there's 2 things. That one is like the practice games are like a week before the real thing. So the practice games, when it's really hot, they get unlimited interchange and extra bench players. And the week later, when it's still really hot, they don't get that when the real stuff starts. So that doesn't really make any sense to me. And the other thing is that because they've changed the format now, over the last few years, and there's, they've gone from, years ago having a whole preseason competition or having, 3 or 4 practice games to now having a simulation, a practice game, and then you start the real stuff. So there's less opportunity to trial new rules or different interpretations. So maybe they need to look at that side of it as well. I don't know.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think the reason that they don't is, again, as with a lot of these things, it's money and TV rights. So less practice games, longer season. So
Yeah.
like for Collingwood last week, for example, that was their second practice game. So
Yeah.
it doesn't actually count towards the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah.
the year.
Unfortunately, that GWS still get points for it, but
Doesn't matter. They get their points. We're just on zero because it was a practice game. So
yeah.
so it's
I
fine.
like
But
it.
yeah, I think that's why they don't have the preseason. But I mean, I used to love the preseason comp. Like I used to really enjoy watching it and seeing them play a few games, and it's all televised, and you get to the young guys. I know it's practice match as well, but it's different when there's a bit on the line, and yeah, you can implement these rules, and chances are the way they seem to do things is they'll, depending on how urgent it is, where sometimes they'll sort of bring a rule in quickly, is bring it in the AFL, in the VFL or the AFLW, and
Yeah.
sort of trial it there and see how it goes, which, that's fine. But that puts it a year away if they're going to do that as well, really.
But maybe it's probably a better way of doing it than not doing it or not trialing it. So it probably makes more sense. I mean, with going back to the preseason competition side of it, I mean, it was 1 year, I think, was it Carlton? They won the preseason competition and then came last in the regular season. And then I also think didn't it all get ruined, I think, when St Kilda won the preseason and Nick Revolt, I think he threw away his medal or something, and or
was
said
it after
something
they
about,
lost the year before or something?
I can't remember, but it just like didn't really value it or said something about not really caring about it. And I think that sort of was the start of the end of it. But having said that, I mean, there's a lot of teams out there. Don't want to name too many teams that it might be like St Kilda and for example, but they have been starved of success. So if they get the opportunity to win a preseason thing, at least it gives their fans something. Obviously it'd be nice for them to get some more on-field success during the season, but at least if they're getting the preseason, it's better than nothing. So maybe that's a discussion for another point. It's a preseason comp.
Yeah, definitely. And it's actually raised two thoughts, one memory and one thought. And the memory, I think, will then lead into the next, our final bit on what we think is good and bad or love, hate. But one thought was like, what if, and again, to take the preseason comp, a bit more seriously as well, and treat it like it's an actual practice game of things. What if you even it doesn't have to be a lot, like even if it's not a full comp, but it's like just everyone gets two kind of formal practice games, but your results somehow contribute to the latter, even if it's just a percentage, something contributes to your actual season. So maybe not necessarily points, or unless it's just 1 point or something, if a half a point for each game. So if you win both, you get 1 point. So it could be just something really simple like that. Or even if it's like just an extra 5% or whatever it might be, then the teams would actually really go for a bit. And because they're fun to watch, and I know we went to the Collingwood Richmond one and they had their almost full strength team, but it was interesting watching that when we watch Steele Sidebottom started on the ball and in almost every centre bounce in that game, and then lined up in half back in the first round. Well, that wasn't a practice game at all. Like, I know they were trying him there, but he did really well. So stuff like that. So yeah, I reckon maybe that. But the memory it brought up, and having been a fan for a long time, we're going to talk about the fans to finish this off, is I remember when I was a kid, and this is a long time ago, and in my bedroom, we had like a normal telly out in the room, but I just had this little tiny sort of TV in my room, and it was black and white. And back in the day when I was watching, the teams didn't have and it was a preseason comp, and it was home jumpers and away jumpers didn't exist. So Collingwood played North Melbourne on a black and white TV, and they just looked exactly the same. And it was it was actually the final of the preseason comp, watching that. And what it meant was that me and my stepdad as well, because we sometimes watch the games together, and on the TV, we had to start getting really good at recognizing the players, not just from the black and white stripes and the number type thing. So we'd get to know how the players ran and how they kicked and even how they moved and marked and stuff like that. So then when we're at the ground, we could be at the other end of the ground and we go, oh, that was so-and-so, because you could just tell by the way that they walked or ran or kicked or whatever it was. It was actually really good. And that thing of this is really hard watching this game in black and white, but it gave us this this greater perception of what the players are actually like. So it was really cool. But we want to talk about the fans. It's a bit of a good bad of opening rounds, and a bit of a love-hate type things.
Love it, hate it
thing. And this is from me, where just seeing the reaction of Collingwood supporters a little bit, and like even I saw one post on a group, well, I think we're both in Facebook, and someone's like, delist this person, delist this person, delist this person, drop this. And I'm like, far out, that's brutal. And then I saw a thing someone put up from Carlton supporters, like, I'm no longer a Carlton fan, that's the worst loss we've ever had. So I'm like, far out. People are just, I actually remember I actually stopped going to the footy at one point, and part of it was because the fans were so negative and brutal. And I remember one game, I remember distinctly, it was Collingwood Geelong, and it was at the MCG. It was about 7 degrees, the opposite of today. It was freezing cold. I had 2 pairs of socks and my feet were still freezing. Collingwood was like 30-something points up, and Geelong were coming back. Right, they come back pretty good. And everyone was being so negative as they came back and swearing and yelling and this and that and useless guy. And Collingwood they weren't the best team at the time, so everyone knew they were really going to struggle to win it, even though they were winning. And it was the start of the last quarter, and I'd been pretty quiet. So I'm like, come on, boys, you can do it. And someone's going, keep it down, will you, mate? You're not allowed to be positive at the footy. So I actually just stopped going. I'm like, I did not enjoy that. I don't know why, but I did not enjoy it anyway, just because of the and it's different now. Like you still get that a little bit at the grounds, but it's fascinating seeing how, and it happened last year with the Port fans and Ken Hinkley, and I'm sure Chris Fagan was probably copping a bit at the start of the year that I didn't see, but probably people calling for him to be sacked and after they lost their first games, and you got to wait it out sometimes and just see.
Yeah. Well, what we were talking about beforehand was the recency bias and how it's and the media, I think, are very much like this as well, where one lost and all of a sudden it's panic stations. And it's like, just wait, especially at the start of the season. No team, generally speaking, has their best players playing in the first game, or their set team in that first game. Like you got to let it settle. Some players will come from nowhere and demand a spot. Other players who you expect to be there every week will just, be out of form or whatever. And then, after a few weeks, 6 weeks or whatever it is, you start to get a bit of an idea who are the mainstays and where your team is perhaps positioned for the season, whether, what the likelihood of them making finals is, this sort of thing. So I think it's very, very quick for people to rule teams out based on one result.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it happens in the media sometimes as well. Like, they can't win the grand final, that performance and all that sort of stuff. And it goes the other way, like not every team's going to have their best team on the ground, but even if they have possibly in that first round, their best 23, like if they rated their players from 1 to 40, they had their 1 to 23 on the ground, it's almost 100% they're not going to be on the ground in round 17 together again.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to be on the ground together in round, the first final potentially. And so whatever that team is at the start, you don't know both ways what it's going to be. So you need those players to come through and you try things, and there's new recruits that sometimes take a little while to get into the system and really go with it and stuff like that. So, anyway, but what we think is fans should just be a little bit more positive, a bit more forgiving, a bit nicer to their team, and that's why we should run the AFL.